radical left has taken over the Democratic Party.
Hello and welcome to Think Progressively, covering politics and all the other chaos life has to offer. This is episode 148, recorded on Friday, May 9th from Milwaukee. I'm Joe.
And I'm Jason.
And on today's episode, we're talking about the internet and how it's used to spread misinformation.
I don't love you anymore, internet. You used to be a safe home for my nerd heart and my intellect. Now you got so much hate that you just gotta interject. Now you got too many chefs up in your kitchenette. Sometimes I wish I loved you.
So before we begin, I'd just like to give some thanks to MC Frontalot for letting us use his song, or at least someone who answers his email said that it was okay for us to use that
You
song.
got actual permission?
Yes, I asked for permission
Oh my goodness.
to use that one. Because normally we make our own music, or AI does, sorry. Because basically I'm not paying anyone anyway. We don't make any money doing this, so no one's losing out by that happening.
Thank you, MC Frontalot, then.
Yeah, it's from, the name of the song is Internet Sucks, and it's from the album Net Split, or the Fathomless Heartbreak of Online Itself, which is a breakup album between him and the internet.
Got it.
So I think it's incredibly appropriate because I kind of share the same views with the internet, and I've been listening to MC Frontalot for a very long time. We just listened to the Yellow Lasers song, and that's probably his most popular. That was the first one I ever heard, all the way back in the Penny Arcade days. If you know, then you know. But it helps demonstrate that the internet is a very big part of my life. It's very important to the shaping of my life. I was 15 in 1995, which was kind of the burgeoning heyday of the internet. I'd been on BBS's previous to that. My first modem was a 2400 baud modem on a 486 SX33 Packard Bell. So I have a very long history with the internet from the very, very earliest days. I'm a nerd. I worked at a computer store.
You could say you're as old as the internet, man.
Well, I'm not.
You're older than the internet.
No, technically I'm not, because
you're older than Windows 95.
Yes, I'm older than Windows 95. But the internet does, of course, have a start earlier in DARPANET and everything like that, when Al Gore invented it. But the modern internet, what we would know as basically the World Wide Web, kind of, there for the beginning of that. And I've worked in IT ever since. I still, to this day, work from home, so that wouldn't be possible without the internet. So it is a wonderful tool, and I don't want to kind of get out of that view. Like, I know that it's very useful. I understand that. But what we're talking about here today is, I think, overall, it's becoming bad for society. And I'm worried about that, and it is really a heartbreaking thing for me. I don't know. What do you think, Joe? What's your...
So, okay. I thought you were going to be a funnier setup line, and this is not, so I have to just kind of go all full heartfelt now. I am a little bit younger than you. For me, at least, my relationship with the internet was... I started with my own dial-up. We had a gateway computer in the late 90s for us. I think Windows 98 was my first.
98 second edition, still my favorite operating system.
Why?
It was the first one with USB support. It was the first really stable, at least from, I was working on fixing computers at this stage in my life.
So you're talking about, as far as a jump goes, in advancement?
Well, and just being stable and having some of the more modern features and kind of just the feel of it, and I guess my perception as a whole, but I certainly have some favorites,
Sure.
Windows XP.
How would I know, man? I have a Mac. Oh!
Yeah.
With my millennial ass. Yeah, so basically, I grew up as, the internet kind of grew up, if that makes sense. I think that's probably a good way of looking at it. I grew up with the internet. I started literally, it was actually very interesting because it was the first time, I think, in my life where I was absolutely certain, I'm talking when I was 5 years old. I was certain I was at the same knowledge level as my mom, who was 30 years older than I am, because we were both like, how does AOL work together?
I actually met my now wife on AOL.
You did the AIM?
Yeah,
Instant
AOL.
Messenger?
Well, it was just like AOL message before Instant Messenger like spun out of that. Like literally AOL message boards. They're talking 28 years ago.
Damn.
So it's been 28 years.
That's pretty dope. Okay. So I started with AOL Kids, which was like a dumbed down version of like the AOL homepage with a bunch of parental guidance. And I could go to like 3 game sites that AOL let me go on to. And then outside of that, I had my email, which I was so excited. You know, you had the classic, like, you've got mail.
Yeah.
Because as a kid, like, you never got email anyway. So it's like, why would you ever get email? Even to the point where it's like, friends of mine, we would send each other emails just to say we got email. So like there was that. And then also for me, it was quintessential growing up in the 2000s, the computer lab in all schools. And doing all like the math games and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, we had that even back in my day. It was just all Apple IIe's. There was no internet. You just had like
right. But for us, it was all internet stuff.
Yeah,
like these were games like you wouldn't like go for a class. These were like you had extra time, and it was one of the approved sites you could go to. So you got to go do like I remember like playing like this math baseball game that looked just so awesome, and I'd spent like so much time on it after like when I got all my work done in class. So yeah, like, stuff like that was all really cool. Had a MySpace, if you guys even remember MySpace anymore.
I didn't have a MySpace account, but I do remember. It was the first social media site that was really popular, and I just remember everyone's pages having music on them.
Dude, there are memes out there where like millennials would say like they learned their first beginning coding with MySpace. That is not a joke, man. I learned very basic coding stuff to like get special, like, all right, I want this particular like Family Guy background here, but I want this like Dragon Ball Z like thing like on like one of my menus or things like that. And then I have this embedded song here, and then I have this like font thing here. And you had to code all that shit, and I had no clue what I was doing.
Right.
So like I had to look up stuff like that. But yeah, I'm kind of there with you. I think it was so exciting to have information more readily available. A very good example of that for me was directions. MapQuest was huge. Yeah. I hated reading maps, even though I knew I could, like I could read maps, but like I hated it. It was so stupid. And then just having the idea of you could just print out your directions and turn by turn where to go. And if I had like to do like a weekend trip with my mom where we were going 3 hours away for like a camping trip, I sat shotgun with like the MapQuest directions in my hand going page by page, and she would get so mad if I missed one of the steps.
Yep. Yeah, you were basically the first GPS.
Yes.
Turn left.
Yes, 100%.
Yep. I have certainly a lot of memories of that too. Yeah, the old printed out directions.
So like things like that I think were just so incredible. I mean, when you want to talk about culture even too, like I also grew up on Newgrounds. That was more edgy humor back in the 2000s, but I think it also paved the way for what we now consider like just general influencers and content creators and things like that. So yeah, it was interesting. Oh, I remember also giving my computer like super cancer from LimeWire. So there was that too.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I lied. Giving my mom's computer super cancer from LimeWire.
Yeah. So at least I could fix that, being someone who was working at a computer store at the time and eventually moved into the service department. So yes, I could at least cure all of the STDs that my computer got from those early Halcyon days. So I have on here pretentious opening.
Okay.
Right, as we get into the actual meat of the episode here. In late 2016, Oxford Dictionaries selected post-truth as the word of the year, defining it as relating to or denoting circumstances in which objective facts are less influential in shaping public opinion than appeals to emotion and personal belief.
Sure, I'm okay with that.
And I feel that's definitely the era that we're in.
Yeah.
And I think that it is, if not...
It's not conjecture or hyperbole. That's the thing, right? It is, again, if anyone wants to debate the post-truth fact. I mean, you're just kind of proving the point. But like, that's what this is. And I think what I struggle with the most, and maybe you can shed more light, but I know you weren't really political back then either, so it'd be still probably difficult for you. I think what I struggle with is I knew there were genuine sources for information, and I could pretty easily tell what was a decent source and what was like a professional source. And usually the professional sources were boring as hell, and I didn't care about any of them. But like, I could at least see like, oh yeah, this was a professional source for information.
For me, I have been led down some dark paths in the past, things that I did believe and not knowing that, no, these are really low quality things. Like, I can remember a specific example of like somehow stumbling upon a quote unquote medical website that talked about how AIDS isn't caused by HIV. Like, there's no real link there and it's all made up. And
well, that's also kind of why I think the early like 2000s internet was really good, because like those websites were always like, you could definitely stumble upon those, but they were the jankiest looking websites, and you could clearly tell like this website was made by some crazy motherfucker.
maybe you could clearly tell.
Well, I'm just really smart, you know?
So, like, I do remember kind of, like, seeing stuff like that and being like, oh, that's interesting. You know, that's crazy that there's this doctor out here who's got this information that, you know, it's... And kind of, you know, I wouldn't say completely integrating that, but definitely thinking that that's a possibility. And it wasn't until I stumbled on to, again, more through the internet, so the cause of and solution to my problems here, The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, that podcast really kind of pushed me to...
Where'd you first hear it?
I wouldn't even be able to tell you. It was so long ago. I don't know where. I think I was just searching for science stuff online.
Or like where was your first podcast listened to? Like, on what did you see your first podcast?
It would have had to been just computer, just PC desktop, you know, like standard, sitting in front of it. I still spend most of my day just sitting in front of my desktop.
Sorry, let me clarify even more.
Okay.
What I mean by that is like my first exposure to like podcasts were through like iTunes, back when you had to download each individual episode independently onto your iPod.
Well, so I had that, but this would have been even more like, I think I'd probably just went to their website.
Okay, cool. Yeah.
And listened to it through there.
Yeah, okay.
I would have had iTunes at that time, but I didn't even have an iPod, or, you know, nobody had cell phones.
Yeah.
So it was just playing it right on my computer. And that's really what got me on that path to recognize what is like a good source, what's not, how to tell the difference, and, you know, all the logical fallacies, everything, like from way back in the day, you know, Perry DeAngelis day, pre-Rebecca Watson. I remember when Rebecca Watson started on Skeptic's Guide. And that is really what turned me around. And then, you know, they had James Randi on. James Randi was a big influence on me as far as understanding the how to tell if someone's scamming you, basically, or tricking you. So that's kind of where I developed that skill. Which I think still works to this day, but it wasn't something that I had kind of innately.
Sure.
It was something that I did have to learn.
Gotcha. Well, and I will say, because I think this is probably also a good bit of groundwork for what we're going to talk about as well. For me, in my experience, I would definitely say having the internet was probably one of the best things for my life back when I was still in the cult. So for those who don't know, like, I was in a cult for several years, and I went into it for somebody else.
It's a religious cult, and your girlfriend was in the cult. I think we can kind of understand that.
Sure. Sounds great. So anyway, I always had reservations about stuff. I was never really a religious guy to begin with. And I was getting indoctrinated. I could feel that much, and I can definitely say as much looking back, but I was still like, I definitely had my doubts and my hesitations, and I just couldn't put my finger on them. And I don't think I would have had, I hate saying it like this because it sounds so goddamn pretentious, but like I would have never had the revelations I did have.
We are still in the pretentious opening phase.
Oh, good.
So,
thank God.
Yes. Okay.
I would never have like had those realizations if it weren't for things like YouTube and like the Thinking Atheist podcast and things like that. that opened my mind so quickly and again, like I still remember like how excited I was that, and I knew like I could tell like I was also going down a rabbit hole myself. Like I knew that was a thing.
Right.
But I was so excited. I'm like, I can just get this information and I can have access to all these people who are very convincing and they can clearly like they're bringing up all these other sources and stuff. And I say that even though I think they were correct in this circumstance, but I say that as like a way to show that people can also fall down pretty bad rabbit holes at the same time, which we'll get to. And because of that, I was able to get out of that religion. I was able to understand what religion more so was. And I am very proud of who I became because of that resource, because of the internet. And I don't know if I would have ever been close to where I was or what would have happened to me if I didn't have those resources as easily at my fingertips.
Right.
I mean, I think the most important thing too is like I could do that privately. You know, it's really hard to just go to the library and get a bunch of books on atheism and shit like that and try to be private about it. So I think being able to like stay up until like midnight or 2 a.m. one night and then just look up a bunch of videos on your own is can be super good or really bad.
Right. Certainly could work the other way
Correct.
as well.
Correct. But that's why I want to say like there are positive things in my life personally that I can at least attribute to having access to the internet and things like that.
Right. And maybe if the internet in general isn't responsible for the post-truth world that we find ourselves in, maybe it's the biggest subset of the internet at this point, social media. So I want to talk about mostly social media and the information and misinformation that is spread through there. And certainly as I relayed my story of seeing that like AIDS misinformation early on, it was pre-social media. It was just on a website. So it can happen anywhere on the internet, but I think social media pushes it in front of us, and having phones.
It definitely exponentially increased.
Right.
With the use of and the ease of social media.
Right. And the smartphones with us at all times. Like all of these things can come up whenever because we always have access to them. But let's talk about the different sites and some things, some studies that I found, and see where it goes. In January of 2023, a USC-led study was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, examining more than 2,400 Facebook users and the types of stories they shared online. More than anything else, the amount of time a user spent on social media and the number of stories they shared with the most engagement were the highest predictor for users who shared misinformation online. So not their age, education level, or political beliefs.
Just how much they've used.
But yes, how much they were exposed to social media, how much they posted, how much time they spent on it. That was the best predictor for how much misinformation that they would share.
Sure.
So not like we would normally think, oh, like right now, like Republicans, oh, they're into all these conspiracy theories, Pizzagate, all this stuff, like they're the ones. Well, it didn't matter what your political beliefs were. It didn't matter what your age was. You generally think younger people are more susceptible and then older people are more susceptible. Well, that didn't matter either, but just how much you were exposed to it. The study found that the incentive structure of social media, engagement rewarded over accuracy, was the most responsible for the spread of misinformation. The study also tested and showed that rewarding accuracy of information over popularity could effectively reverse this behavior in their experiments. It doubled the amount of accurate information shared. So if social media was geared to reward you based on the truthfulness or the accuracy of the information you're sharing over just how many people click on it, how many people comment on it, like it, all that, it would actually reverse what we're seeing. And people would share more accurate information, but that's not how it works. And I'm sorry, it's never gonna be how it works, unfortunately.
Well, because that's the point.
Right. Well, and it's getting worse. As we just saw earlier this year, Meta, the parent company of Facebook, announced that they were removing their fact-checking team in favor of the failed Twitter community notes system over fears of censorship. And that's something that we are seeing everywhere. It's being pushed by the current Trump administration that, social media shouldn't be censoring free speech. If you tell people that, no, COVID vaccines are perfectly safe And hydroxychloroquine is not an effective treatment for COVID. That is not just being truthful and fighting back against medical misinformation. No, that's censoring people's free speech. So we can't do that. And instead, we'll just rely on random community members to somehow have the right information and be able to push that through the noise of everyone else, which of course does not work. And it's much cheaper for the corporation. So of course, why pay people to fact check?
Right.
When you don't need to.
Well, and I think it's also scary too, and forgive me because I wasn't prepared for this, but I don't have the name of the study online or on hand right now, but there was a study that I saw that came out last year, I believe, where it kind of proves the obvious, the idea of doing your own research online, where I think it was over 2/3 of people, or like 75%. It was like a big number of individuals who were shown misinformation and then asked to try to verify those misinformation pieces online, end up having more strengthened beliefs in that misinformation or in those claims at least.
Right.
So like we are struggling because there are no tools in place, and we are not prepared as people to be able to vet things at this type of level.
Right. And I don't see, again, because I had this upbringing with the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, I can name that is confirmation bias.
Correct.
That, you find something that confirms what you already believe, and you're much more likely to trust that. Versus if you find something that contradicts with what your previous beliefs are, you're much more likely to not trust that.
Correct.
So yeah, I can.
And there is a mountain of research
right.
and all that too. So like this is not anything like novel. It was just more so just going to the idea specifically of online research for claims of misinformation.
And of course, online, as we talked about, conspiracies and stories that are crafted to elicit strong emotional responses will always be the most popular and garner the most engagement online. Pre-internet, there certainly have always been people like Alex Jones ranting on public access TV stations.
Yeah, wasn't it like the super late at night stuff?
Yeah.
Like 3 a.m. stuff.
And that's literally where Alex Jones began his career. But major networks, and especially during any kind of time slot that anyone would see, would never give someone like that a show because they would be responsible for the things that person said. Sponsors would leave immediately, and that's something that's even plagued Alex Jones on his radio show. But online, there's no such barrier. That's the genius of it, right? Like, we can just speak into the void and send it out to
Correct.
the world. There's no barrier. There's no pretense of journalistic integrity. Jones and InfoWars were removed from most social media platforms following the lawsuit by the families of Sandy Hook Elementary. That school shooting, the victims who Alex Jones claimed were crisis actors. He said it was a false flag operation intended to take away your guns.
Yeah, it wasn't great, man. Families got death threats and had to move over this crap.
And they won an over $1 billion lawsuit against Jones. Jones had his permanent Twitter ban removed by Elon Musk in 2023 after Musk had previously stated that he would not do so because Jones, quote, would use the deaths of children for gain, politics, or fame. So he said he would not reinstate Alex Jones because he uses the death of children for personal gain or politics. And then a year later changed his mind.
Yeah.
But hold on. Elon Musk didn't change his views. Remember, the left left him. Everything started shifting more to the extreme left.
Oh, yeah. That's why we had to rethink our position on Alex fucking Jones.
Right. So there really is little that can be done. Jones has his own website, which broadcasts his brain-melting rants daily. Maybe that $1 billion settlement will end up with him having to give over InfoWars. If you remember last year, it was supposed to happen, right, in the auction that was won by The Onion.
But the judge stopped it.
But that was reversed by judge's orders, and it's still there. Alex Jones still continues to rant every day. But even if that does happen, he's just going to rebrand, move on,
And do it again.
yeah, and keep doing the same thing. He continues to be a guest on other popular shows like the probably largest misinformation spreader in the world right now, Joe Rogan.
Who has said multiple times that he is good friends with Alex Jones.
Oh yes, they are two peas in a fucking pod cast, if you will.
Ah,
He co-hosted or guest hosted Steven Crowder's podcast at one point. And while he might be banned and his show is banned from sites like YouTube, people post clips from it all the time. And yeah, they get taken down, but it's like playing whack-a-mole. They come up, they get taken down. And not only does it spread his horrible message even further, the people that do it get paid
yeah.
to do it. That's
Well, this is literally the whole like Andrew Tate thing too, right? Like Andrew Tate's also been banned on all these platforms as well, but we still see him all the time because of these literal content farms.
right. Yeah, and they do it to make money. They're not really ideological, but they know what's popular. And they don't even have any connection to the people they're essentially stealing from.
Right.
But it still helps to spread that misinformation. That is the nature of the internet.
Right.
We've opened Pandora's box, and it can never be shut again. It's not just Facebook, obviously.
Obviously.
A 2022 research project from NewsGuard found that over 20% of results when searching for news on TikTok resulted in misinformation on topics ranging from COVID to Russia's invasion of Ukraine to school shootings. In 2023, researchers at the University of Arizona conducted a study on TikTok searching for videos related to liver disease and found that nearly 40% contained misinformation.
Yikes.
MIT researchers published a study in the Journal of Science in 2018 showing that false stories spread 10 times faster than truthful ones.
Yep.
The research included 12 years of Twitter data, starting with the inception of the platform in 2006 until 2017, and looked at 4.5 million tweets covering 126,000 news items. Real news stories rarely reached 1,000 views, while misinformation routinely reached 10,000 views, according to the data. False news diffused significantly further, faster, broader, and deeper in every category of information, according to the study's co-author Sinan Aral.
Well, and I think that's predictable. So when you look at misinformation, I try to attribute it through, it's the same reason why there's so much more money in demand in being like a more conservative influencer, if that makes sense. That's peddling this crap. Where number one, it's, well, of course, misinformation will spread faster because those are more outrageous headlines. You know, we go back to like the children with litter boxes in schools and things like that.
Right.
Who said it? There are a couple people that said where it's like, I can empathize with people who fall for these things and that have like real anger towards these issues because, yeah, let's be real here. If that was true, that would be insane. And that probably would be cause for outrage. Like that's like if there were literal teachers saying to kids, go poop in the litter box that I put out there for you, because I know now you're a cat. That would be a crazy thing that we should be talking about. And I do agree with that. So they're just on a like psychological level, we are always going to be more interested in those types of stories because those are the more literally interesting stories to look at. And then on top of that, I think there's also, going back to the demand portion of it, I think a lot of this is also just driven by just general identities that want to be preserved. And what I mean by that is, while we reject it as a society typically because it's so normalized, there is a literal straight white identity. There is a toxic male identity that wants to be preserved for a lot of groups. And people will go really hard to preserve those types of identities because they feel very insecure about them. And I think that's why you have a lot of people who are very concerned about, I mean, that's really where the idea of anti-PC, anti-wokeness, anti-CRT, anti-DEI all comes from.
Sure.
It's all just based on these normalized identities that people are very insecure about and are afraid of being attacked for those identities.
And the research does agree with you. The researchers originally thought that this would be down to bots spreading this misinformation on Facebook.
God, I wish.
And then they thought, well, maybe it's the number of followers that, that just happens to be that the people spreading misinformation have more followers than the people that post real information.
Sure. So it's just like a numbers game, they think.
Right, that's what they had originally thought. But when they looked at the numbers, they were relatively even for both true and fake news. Instead, what they came up with was basically what we've been talking about this whole time. Their hypothesis was because the false information was new and something that someone hadn't heard before, you kind of ignore the things that you already have heard or already established in your mind. You're like, yep, I already know that, skip. But something that's new makes you read it.
Right.
And those stories generated a greater emotional response than the true news. And that was the cause for the virality. Users sharing sensational news, both that they agreed and disagreed with. So even though you might be thinking like, oh, I'm gonna post this and talk about how terrible this is to all of, my friends and family online, you're just exposing them to more misinformation.
Right.
That they might see it and, not believe you, not trust you, and think that, no, this story, you're sharing it, this is what I agree with. So these things spread even further because it generates outrage, because you want to engage with it. You see it all the time online, even outside of anything political, outside of anything that really has any material benefit or detraction for anyone, just like weird shit, like cooking videos.
Yeah.
You see people that just throw slop on their countertop and I'm making dinner and it's just like a pile of spaghetti with garbage on top of it. No one cooks like that. It's not a serious video.
No.
They just do that because it makes people engage with it. Because people are like, what the fuck is this?
Yep.
What is wrong with you? And they comment on it and they share it. And that's what makes money.
Well, and I think that, you hit on something that's very integral to this.
It's called engagement bait.
Yes. But on that point, though, I think what I really struggle with, and I think a lot of people really struggle with, is deciphering from whether these are truly held opinions and beliefs versus just going for engagement to do something or just trolling. Mm-hmm. I still remember, and I'm not going to remember exactly, but our friend Lawrence was the one that would talk to me about it all the time, where this is my favorite example of it. There was the one woman who went viral in the 2010s, I want to say, because she put out a video that said dinosaurs weren't real and all the fossils were placed by the devil and shit like that. Yeah. And that was people are losing their minds. This is what Christianity is. It's so stupid, blah, blah, blah. And I even believe that. And
there is a biblical basis for this.
Sure. But my whole point was with that particular video, our friend had to tell me no, she's a trolling shit poster. And that's what she does. She's a comedian. And I think it's really tough nowadays because you cannot tell.
The flat earth thing.
Or but that's the other thing too. It's there are so many times where I would even want if I'm talking to somebody in a comment section on our own Facebook pages, right? We know people in these comment sections. I need to make it explicitly clear if I'm ever making a joke because I am terrified that people will treat it that as seriously and all of a sudden we get into an argument with something else. That's a real concern I think with the online presence as well, is that you cannot tell the difference between real and just shit posting or trolling or just engagement baiting. And I think this is also why Donald Trump became as popular as he was, because people cannot tell the difference on whether Donald Trump is just screwing around or not. And everything just becomes a big Rorschach test where you think, or with half the people think oh yeah, this is real. We need to take it seriously. And the other people it's just a joke. It's fine.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of that, one of the things that I wanted to talk about too, when we are talking about these things, is the role of AI, or really what they are, predictive large language computer modeling.
Which is making the whole thing more complicated and worse.
Right, because thousands upon thousands of images, video, and articles can be pumped out with little to no relation to reality and uploaded across the internet at the click of a button.
Yep.
They've even been embraced now by the Trump administration, who posted an AI image of Donald Trump dressed as the head of the child molesting ring known as the Catholic Church shortly after he attended the funeral for the former pope. See the little image there? Donald Trump dressed in the Pope vestments, obvious AI image, and
Oh,
some
look
Catholics.
at that. He's got MS-13 on his knuckles.
Yes. He's a known gang member. Some Catholics were outraged over this, the idea that Trump, who is not Catholic, would be the head of their church. Someone who's had multiple divorces is a terrible human being. Some said, no, he's just trolling.
Yep, like J.D. Vance. Try telling like several archdioceses, it's fine, get over it.
It's just a joke to own the libs. Now, getting to a religion that I care about, the White House account also tweeted a ridiculous AI picture of an absurdly buff Donald Trump wielding a lightsaber for May the 4th.
With American flags and eagles in the background.
Yes. And it says, Happy May the 4th to all, including the radical left lunatics who are fighting so hard to bring Sith lords, murderers, drug lords, dangerous prisoners, and well-known MS-13 gang members back into our galaxy. You're not the rebellion. You're the empire. May the 4th be with you.
Whoever, I want to know who's writing these like posts too, because it is like the dumbest.
Well, and it's got the random capitalization, then
are these just Trump ideas that he's telling people, like he's dictating, or what is happening?
I don't know, but what we really got to talk about here, Joe, and yes, this is obviously an AI generated image. Donald Trump is wearing black robes and he's got a red lightsaber.
Oh, we're not going to talk about the fact that he's buff as all
Well,
shit.
I talked about that already, but
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
you're clearly not listening, but that's okay. Even AI knows that Donald Trump is evil.
That is one of my favorite like self-owns I've ever seen.
He looks more like Ken from Street Fighter.
He does look a bit like Ken.
Yeah, like that looks like the body.
Yeah.
With the Donald Trump head on top and a lightsaber.
It is, the fascination is so weird. Where like they have to like just constantly reimagine Donald Trump as the buffest, manliest looking idol they have ever seen. Like, and again, look at a real picture of Donald Trump. He is the frumpiest looking guy, such a goddamn loser figure ever. And everyone needs a picture of him as like a fucking Rambo figure.
Right.
And I'm like, what are we
literally
doing?
Rambo in a lot of cases.
Well, that too, yeah. But like, what are we doing?
Yeah, I don't know. And I mean, talk about post-truth. Like, this is the White House, official White House communication, hosting this shit.
To troll. We have trolls leading our country.
Yes.
Like, this is the problem. See, it's all fun and games until the trolls lead the country.
And I mean, Jon Stewart already made this whole joke, so I'm not going to go too much into the Star Wars lore, but I mean, obviously, the red lightsaber, man.
It's funny. Well, and I also saw somebody else that said that either one of two things happened. Either A, like you said, ChatGPT or whoever made this immediately just saw Donald Trump be like, you're absolutely a Sith Lord.
Right.
And gave him a red lightsaber. Or
Donald Trump would have a red lightsaber.
Or my other favorite, which is so funny, is that they're so fucking dumb. They're like, well, give it red because we're Republicans, so it's got to be red, dude.
And they just don't know.
And they just have zero freaking clue because they're so dumb.
And it's like, it even references Sith Lords as a bad thing in the post.
I know, and then gives them a Sith lightsaber.
Yeah. So dumb. I've even, like, talk about, like, cope, man.
Yeah.
People are like, no, it's orange. It's not red. It's fucking red.
Dude, that's sad. You're right. And Elon did a Roman salute. Shut up. It's so stupid.
That motherfucker poured his hatred and rage into a kyber crystal and made it bleed and turn red. That's what happened in this AI generated image. God damn it.
He took the blood of a baby bald eagle and
No, see, that's really how it works in Star Wars lore.
I was trying to Americanize it somehow. And you said something about blood, so I just like try to imagine bald eagles getting blood on there or something. It's fine. You know, the whole thing too, kind of what I said before is we have trolls in the White House. I think another really good, just general rule of thumb for like how I view the internet nowadays is back in like early to mid 2000s, I got a graphic t-shirt from Walmart because I was super cool and edgy. Mm-hmm. And it said, don't underestimate the power of stupid people in large groups. And I thought that was the funniest thing ever. And in a weird way of being very positive, where it's like, hey, we may all be dumb, but we can all rise up and do something good together. Don't underestimate. Like, we're all stupid, but we can do it. I now realize that shirt was a warning.
Right.
And I think
It's a predictor of what
that's
things
the
to come.
best way I can describe the internet today is that you're right. severely underestimated the power of stupid people in large groups.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
They destroyed the largest repository of information known to mankind.
Yes.
So, of course, we have to then talk about Donald Trump and the internet. There's been a lot said about how traditional media helped Donald Trump win 2 presidential elections, and that's certainly true. The Jeff Bezos-owned Washington Post refused to endorse a candidate for the first time since 1976 after canceling a planned announcement to endorse Kamala Harris. The Sinclair Broadcasting Group and Rupert Murdoch's Fox News are open and obvious Trump sycophants, but I think there is as much, if not more, blame to lay at the feet of my once beloved internet.
I would argue so much more, by the way.
And I don't know if you heard this, but speaking of the coward that is Jeff Bezos, did you hear that Amazon was going to put
the
price,
tariffs?
Yeah,
and then they got scared shitless and then...
Right. So they were going to put the price of the tariffs on everything that you buy at Amazon, right? It would show you, this is the price of the item. This is how much of that price is due to tariffs.
Yep.
So that everybody is well aware of why the prices are going up so much. Donald Trump called Jeff Bezos to complain about it after it was announced. And then immediately after that phone call...
Well, they threatened Amazon.
Yeah, well, that's certainly... I'm sure he said something like, we're actually going to do what the government is supposed to do and investigate you for being a monopoly. Maybe that was what he said. I don't know. But right after that phone call, Amazon announced that no, this wasn't what they were going to do. It was supposed to be just something on their like Temu-like site. I forgot the name of whatever it was, Amazon Bulk or some bullshit. And we're not going to do that now. So, fake news, I guess. And it was just obvious capitulation to the authoritarian regime that we're now all under. I mean, I don't know how else to call it. I mean,
Yep.
the Trump administration is an authoritarian regime. We have an authoritarian regime in the United States.
Yep.
We can stop talking about Russia and China and, 1930s Germany. We're here, baby. We are one of the members of that club. But going back to the internet being responsible for Donald Trump, obviously, I feel something that we've talked about before, Steve Bannon and Breitbart, along with a very large ad campaign on Facebook, both officially by the Trump campaign and unofficially by Vladimir Putin in Russia, were really the vanguard of the Trump online campaign during his first election.
Yep.
But
Which you can read in the Mueller report, by the way.
Right.
The supposed Russian hoax that is completely laid out
that
in
a lot
the
of
Mueller
people
report.
went to jail over. But the second Trump campaign, I think, is where the real power of the current right-wing media ecosystem online became clear. Leading up to the election, Trump was a guest on shows with Adin Ross, Theo Vaughn, Andrew Schultz, Patrick Bet-David, and, of course, Joe Rogan, which his appearance on that show received 50 million views prior to the election alone. And that is, again, just the official number. You can count the hundreds of Joe Rogan clips, things that are online, and, I mean, it had to have been the hundreds of millions of views and listens total just for that one appearance. And they are all wildly popular programs who target mainly young men and are all extremely friendly to Trump's politics. There's also celebrities and shows like Russell Brand, Logan Paul, Jordan Peterson, UFC President Dana White, who are all very vocal Trump supporters.
He beats his wife.
Yes, he does. Alex Jones, even, we talked about earlier. They're vocal Trump supporters. They have massive audiences of predominantly young men.
Well, yeah, and I think it's a testament to our era that we're in. And I don't know what it would be. I mean, we've had Edge Comics for so long, so I don't think it's the Edge Comics in this case that are doing it per se. I think it's the fact that we are seeing an era.
Hey, but Trump made comedy legal again.
Yeah, I'm sure we did. That's why we're seeing, I think since the first Trump administration, or at least the first Trump campaign, there's been such a focus on politics and governance because of Donald Trump, because of how insane, going back to the whole idea, like even like misleading information, the bigger the emotional appeal, of course, the more it's going to spread. That's the idea. And with Donald Trump, everything was the craziest it could have ever been at all times, and still is the craziest it always can be at all times.
Like even to this very moment.
Exactly. That's how he runs his campaign, and it's absolute horrible and chaos. I think there's a difference between that, where you saw comedians that were just like some random jack off that would just talk about nothing all day long, to today where you see like Joe Rogan has comedians on his show all the time and they talk politics on it, where they'll both say, well, we have no idea what we're talking about, and then they'll just continue talking about it like they're experts on the matter, and people get influenced by that stuff. If you took that, like look back to what was it? And forgive me, because I wasn't a huge fan of it. The Green Room back in the day. It was like the podcast talk show of like they get 5 comedians all together. And they would shoot the shit with those comedians. They hardly talked as much politics as they do now. Like they talked like general society things every once in a while, but they kind of shoot the shit a little bit.
Right.
This is much more of like, why is Joe Rogan talking about USAID?
Right.
That should never be a thing. And I think that's the problem we have right now. And I think that's because of Donald Trump and our extremely like hyper fixation as a society on politics because of Donald Trump.
Right. I think you are right. And I think, we're seeing it much more on the right wing, where these supposedly non-political shows, which is what we've been talking about. We're not even talking about things like the Daily Wire, which are obviously, I mentioned Jordan Peterson, and he's now part of that, but he was
didn't
very
start
popular before
Right.
that as well. But these are really non-political shows.
Right. But what do they all do, though? They all try to preserve those same fragile identities that I talked about before. That's all it is. And again, that's the basis of anti-PC and anti-woke.
Right.
It's just trying to preserve these privileged identities at the end of the day, because people think that, for God's sakes, Jason, like I nearly lost my mind and became a hardcore Republican because I was told I couldn't say the R word.
Right.
In college. And then that way, like, I demand free speech.
Right.
And I am losing my mind. All because of that. That's how a privileged little white boy I was. I can empathize with that. And that's exactly what's happening again right now.
And I would certainly say that I have pushed back against that in the past as well. Just not understanding, like, does it have a history and like a meaning that are outside of intentionally offending people? Yes, but it does intentionally offend people as well, and they would rather you just not say it. Fine.
Yeah.
I can live with that.
But I think it's important to know, like, I based an identity on that. and I say that, like, is that embarrassing? Absolutely it is. But I want to do it, say, like, this is a normal process that a lot of young men go through.
There is certainly a version of me that would have argued very long that it's perfectly acceptable.
Words change meaning all the time. Yeah.
Even that, that you should be allowed to say that. And I would probably bring up free speech and everything else incorrectly. And yes, I certainly have had that in my background.
Well, and we talked about getting close to falling into Gamergate, stuff like that too. Like it's very normal and common to have these reactions, and that's why it's so popular today. When you have Theo Vaughn just like, hey, I'm just gonna say this racist joke and have everyone just laugh, that's a relief for a lot of people. And again, like I also get like in certain circumstances, like that's just sometimes funny and I get it. But when you have people who are just trying to be like very shitty and racist, do that type of thing all the time, and especially with Donald Trump, you turn that into policy, that's where shit starts going really bad.
Right. And well, why do I think this popularity of these types of shows, why do I think this leads to Donald Trump? Surely there is just as many popular left-wing shows, right? Like we're just talking about ones that happen to be right-leaning, even though they say they're not political, but if you listen to them, it's extremely, it's like Tim Pool, oh, I'm not right-wing, I'm not a conservative, like bullshit. And by the way, Tim Pool is now part of the White House press pool.
I know.
If that doesn't make you want to burn down the entire country right now and just start over again,
have you seen him ask any questions? It's really funny. He is so bad at it.
Jesus Christ. But why do I feel like it is mostly a right-wing advantage here? It's not just me. A MediaMatters.org analysis, which, by the way, Elon Musk is trying to sue them out of existence currently. A analysis of 320 popular online shows, 191 right-leaning and 129 left-leaning, found that the right-wing shows had 82% of the total followers and subscribers on online platforms: YouTube, Rumble, Twitch, Kick, Spotify, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, nearly 5 times higher than the left-leaning shows. Only a single left-leaning show was in the top 10, Trevor Noah's What Now? In 2021, Pew Research released data showing that 42% of U.S. adults aged 18 to 29 were more likely to get their news online than from any other source. And 2 years later, in 2023, Pew conducted another poll showing that 87% of Americans who hear news on podcasts say they believe the information to be mostly accurate, which ranked much higher than other news sources.
Which, that's terrifying.
And I believe that same poll also said that podcasts that were mostly politics only made up 8% of what people listen to. So thank
Hooray.
you to our very few listeners.
Hooray. But again, I think it goes back to as well with politics. It's important to know, for full disclosure, I like my own podcasts. You know, you talked about the Skeptic's Guide to the Universe and all that fun stuff too. Like, I think this is going to be a bad example for what I'm talking about with that one, but you'll get what I'm saying in a second here. We have to remember and recognize that I also get I listen to lots of news podcasts. And what I mean by that is not just New York Times, NPR, and others. I listen to things like Pod Save America and Cognitive Dissonance and others like that, and Behind the Bastards and whatnot. These are not experts. This is not NPR. This is not, the Journal podcast, which is also a very good news podcast. This is infotainment at best. And I think that's also where we should be really careful about too, because a lot of entertainment today on YouTube and TikTok and just general social media is infotainment, where there are kernels to truth about things, and then it goes on farther to try to entertain you about them, which can be good, making more education much more interesting for people. I think that's great, but that's where a lot of the misinformation also comes from, is that you have people who are not experts will just make shit up, but they sound very convincing.
At least we have the decency to not entertain you.
It's not from a lack of trying either. It's just
a lack of skill. Yeah. Skill issue, as the kids say.
We don't have aura. That's the problem.
Or charisma, or funding, a lot of other things.
Likability,
talent.
Friends.
So why is this important? That there are hundreds of extremely popular podcasts out there that are sports, lifestyle, general entertainment, things focused directly at young men that also happen to be extremely right-leaning, conservative, Trump-supporting. Well, in the last election, the numbers show that Donald Trump won white men with college degrees 56% to Kamala Harris's 42%. White men with no college degree, 67% to Kamala Harris's 32%. White women with no college degree, 55% to Kamala Harris's 43%. Luckily, white women with a college degree, 39% to Kamala Harris's 60%. That is where Donald Trump won this election. And he won it on the backs of people like Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
When Dana White, the president of the UFC, was speaking during Trump's acceptance speech after he won the election, he shouted out all of these influencers, and specifically, as he said, the mighty and powerful Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
That is, I think, what won this election for Donald Trump, who is now paving the way for the future of these online spaces to remain the way they are, removing any pretense of government regulation, threatening, as we saw, anyone who tries to go against that, and making the world a worse place for the truth and a much easier space for misinformation, and obviously specifically misinformation that caters to his politics. And I think that is extremely dangerous. And the internet is what got us here,
right?
Unfortunately. So it's hard to say that, yep, the internet overall is a good good thing when I think it is responsible for us being in an authoritarian regime right now. And it is responsible for us failing badly at handling a global pandemic for the first time in our lifetime. The fact that this happened while we had an established repository of mankind's knowledge like the internet, and we did no better, if not worse, than 100 years prior, is fucked.
Yeah, that's abysmal, right? Because again, when you think about the multiple misinformation we have, I mean, God, what's even worse is that not only that, but one of the biggest disseminators of COVID misinformation is now the head of the HHS.
Right.
So like I thought about that so many times too, where it's so easy supposedly to get all this information. New York Times had a daily COVID tracker. People were posting on social media constantly about COVID updates and what you should do, what you shouldn't do. It was so easy to find the updates. But then at the same time, it wasn't, because you also had to sift through the boatloads of misinformation to sometimes get to these websites and to even like say, okay, now I'm here. I don't know how to understand this. So then you look on YouTube for a guy to help you understand it, and you don't even understand that he's like some fucking quack.
Right.
I mean, I still remember like the Plandemic documentary that went viral. Mm-hmm. That was crazy. And it took so many people. So many of my friends shared that goddamn documentary. I also remember, I don't know if you know, this was a little bit lesser known or probably lesser remembered at this point. Those two doctors that were one of the first ones to really come out against all of the like stay-at-home orders and like the vaccines and all this other stuff. And it was such a big deal that these like doctors were going on record saying that this was a huge overreach and that it was actually bad for medical reasons here and there. And they were just two like plastic surgeons out of California.
Yeah. My chiropractor says, yeah.
So it's just,
Dr. Baby Twister.
So I think that's the problem. Like, yes, can you theoretically get information today like you never could before? 100%. Is learning something way easier today than it ever used to be? Yes, it really is. And I'm going to stand by that. Like, if you want to learn about something, we literally just Google it nowadays. That's insane. The problem is we live in a different world now, and we do not have the abilities or the skills to be properly skeptical in this new era. And that's kind of where I think I fall in the whole thing, which is just the internet's here. We are in the internet age. We are in the age of information. I think we're also in the post-truth era as well. The only way out of it is to teach billions of people the skills on how to navigate the internet. I don't know any other way that's going to be really plausible. And even that's not really plausible either, which scares the hell out of me.
Well, come on. Linda McMahon is the head of the Department of Education now, Joe. Anything is possible.
So I think that's kind of where I land on the internet as a whole thing. I think it can be good. I think it has been good. I think if you saw the community building around the BLM protests in 2020, that was some of my favorite uses of social media I've ever seen in my entire life.
I liked when the internet decided they hated JD Vance.
And everyone, that
was kind of cool.
Everyone thought that he fucked couches. It was great.
He definitely did. That's why the new Pope hates him, because that's his couch now that got fucked. I mean, what is he going to do with this deflowered couch? That couch was a virgin before J.D. Vance got there. You know how the Catholic Church feels about that.
So that's how I feel, at least. I think what just scares me the most is I just don't know what to do. And I think that's a sentiment a lot of people have.
Yeah. I mean, I know what should be done. There are sites that out there that are very much fighting against this. Snopes has been around forever. They're a wonderful place to go try to verify information.
But we can't agree as like a populace that we should trust them, though. That's the problem. But I agree with you.
Right. We have Wikipedia, I think, is a wonderful resource, which is kind of funny because, we both remember the beginnings of Wikipedia where everyone hated Wikipedia. But it's become one of the more reliable places for information.
Yep.
Because they care. And that's really, they care about being correct. And they will do everything they can to correct, misinformation. PolitiFact and factcheck.org, I think, are both very much worthwhile, even though, I don't always agree with their interpretation on things, because politics sometimes does come down to interpretation, but they still, again, they try, they care, they want to be right. I think, what if I'm Lord Emperor of the world for a day, what would I do to fix my beloved baby boy, the internet? I would kill social media. That would be step one. And I hope that in the grand scheme of things, social media ends up just being a fad. And I hope it dies. And I hope it dies soon. Because I think a lot of the other things that we could have talked about for the ills of the internet, you want to possibly start a family soon. I'm not going to have any kids. I cannot imagine trying to raise a kid in this day and age with the way social media is.
Yeah.
Good luck to you.
Well, especially now with AI too. It's just
Right.
like, oh my God.
And just the harm that does to children, having them exposed to social media 24 hours a day. I think rightfully, in a lot of instances, even though it was maybe a little overblown, talked about how damaging to children not being in school for, a year during COVID was. Just having them exposed to social media is so much worse. And we're not doing anything to safeguard them. You look at the laws in the United States are an absolute fucking joke compared to the rest of the world.
It really feels like social media is like the new smoking, and we are in
it becoming not popular, hopefully.
Well, but I'm talking like we're like in like the 1950s right now.
We're still in that.
Where we're trying to figure out if like cigarettes are bad for you. That's kind of feel like that's why I feel like where we are right now.
Or like really in the 1950s where everyone knew it was bad for you, but tobacco companies were paying researchers to come up with fake studies that say it's good.
I mean, yeah, basically. Like, I don't know what we do about it because it's so ingrained in our lives at this point. It's so difficult. Like, I'm trying hard to cut back on social media wherever I can, but it's also a tool for a bunch of other stuff. I do see a notable difference in my friends who still live on social media, like Facebook and Twitter and things like that. I'm like, dude, get the fuck off.
Yeah.
Like, you're posting to nobody. What are you doing? So, like, I see that type of stuff as well, and it's not great. And then on top of that too, it's like, so Facebook tried to also like fix that a little bit with like all their groups and stuff, but there's tons of research out there too that tons of misinformation comes from these groups because that's how it worked.
Right.
Because
well, and again, engagement. Yeah. And that's the thing, right? The financial incentive, which is always what corporations, they legally have to do what is financially beneficial, right? It's their fiduciary responsibility. They have to legally do what is best for their shareholders, which is to make money. They will never self-regulate. They literally can't.
No.
The only thing that can be done, which would be the second step in my God Emperor fix the internet plan, government regulation.
Yeah.
The government has to step in here. It is a public good that the internet is a place with reliable, accurate, truthful information and not a cesspit of shit and hate like it is currently. Under this current administration, fuck no, that's never going to happen. They love it. This is the pit they were born in. They need the pit.
I was born in the pit.
That's where they came from. They need it. They survive. Like it's Dogma's 25th anniversary. I don't know if you saw that movie. It's a Kevin Smith movie. Again, I am a child of the 90s. Of course, I'm a Kevin Smith fan. But there was the Golgothan shit monster that was born from the shit of the people that were crucified by the Romans.
Sure.
That's the Trump administration. And the shit pile right now is the internet and all of the misinformation on it. So they are a shit monster. Without the shit, they don't survive. So of course they're not going to regulate the shit, but hopefully sanity will prevail at some point.
But I think what also scares me too, just to cut you off on the hopefully sanity will prevail part of that, because I also fear this is very much like climate change, where it's too abstract and it's too complex of a problem for most people to understand. And I am very afraid that it will not get better, because just like with climate change, people cannot grasp what is happening because they literally cannot see what is going on. All they see is memes and like funny random videos on their TikTok feeds. They don't see what else is happening beyond that. And that also terrifies me too. Sorry for totally.
No, I mean, this is
and
me being God Emperor. So
okay.
I don't give a shit what they say.
Got it. Okay.
Third step, I just would echo with what you already said. Education. We need to teach critical thinking. We need to teach how to identify valid information and misinformation everywhere.
At a younger age.
Yeah, it needs to be just a normal part of education.
Like, this needs to be what Republicans think cursive writing is.
Right, like reading, writing, arithmetic should be reading, writing, arithmetic, critical thinking.
Or I would say like critical thinking and like online like literacy.
And I think it goes beyond just online too, or at least
Right.
it should.
I mean, I agree, but I'm talking like just
Yeah.
like to keep it relevant specifically to like how to navigate online spaces because we are specifically not prepared to do that. I mean, yes, if you just do like a more general like skepticism, critical thinking, like emphasis, I think that's also very, very good.
Right.
But I think you need very explicit instruction on how to navigate today's online world.
I'm putting Stephen Novella in charge of my Department of Education.
That'd be great.
Yeah, it'd be nice.
That'd be so nice. Put Cara Santa Maria for HHS.
Or we could swap the two, I guess.
That's also fine. They'd be good both ways. It doesn't matter.
It works either way. But yeah, I think that's what needs to be done. Again, the current political climate, no shot. It's going to take somebody who knows what they're doing, which, given our recent presidential choices even,
Yep.
it's an uphill climb.
It will be.
But I hope it happens. I hope we can save the internet. I hope it doesn't end up just continuing to be, the pile of shit or eventually get burned down like the Library of Alexandria. I want it to always be there to stand as like one of the greatest human achievements and the collection of human knowledge that it's supposed to be.
Yep.
And not just this horrible place.
Well, that's the idea, right? Is that because, again, going back to like how easy it is to access all this information, we as like a species have been able to like rapidly multiply our advancement because of how easy it has been to access information and to build off that information. That's fucking incredible. We would not have nearly the technological advancements that we have today without the internet. We just gotta try to, like you said, save it from itself.
Yeah.
Well, that wasn't horribly depressing.
And of course, as always, we veer into politics, but I feel like we have to.
That's what it is today.
interlaced. Everything is downstream of politics.
Yep, I agree. Or as I always say, politics is everything, whether you like it or not.
So that's all we have for you on this episode. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you again in 2 weeks.
Adios. Thank you so much for listening. If you want to get in contact with us, you can find us on Blue Sky at ThinkProPod, or you can reach out to us via email at thinkpropod@gmail.com. And remember, when in doubt, think progressively. Show me your genitals. I don't understand. Is being naked bad? I don't.